So welcome everyone. Today I will be presenting on effective and equitable community engagement and some of the reasons why I think that is very important when we're doing work in the public sector. So I'll go through the agenda for today. I'll do a brief introduction on the sort of work I do. I'll go through what equitable engagement is, why it is important to do this sort of work, the differences between co-design and participatory processes, because co-design is a word that comes up a lot when we talk about community engagement. And then I'll present some examples on this work. One case study from Mi Taxi, or My Taxi in Spanish, in Mexico City, a project that I developed for my PhD. And then a case study developed in New Jersey for the Future of Work Task Force. Finally, I'll just go through some considerations to think about when designing an engagement process. So many years ago, I trained as a graphic designer. That's kind of my disciplinary home. But then I started to work for the government and got really interested on the role of designers in the public sphere, in the public sector. So I did a doctorate on the role of designers in government, specifically in innovation labs in Mexico and Latin America. Currently, as Hannah was saying, I am a postdoctoral fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change and the GovLab at Northeastern University. And next year, I'll be transitioning into an assistant professor position where I'll do more of this sort of research. I'm very excited about that. But just as a bit of a summary, for the last decade, I've worked on topics related to the use of design in the public sector as a creative approach to reframe public problems. And the work I'm really the proudest of is the one that I did as a public servant in Mexico. So I was a public servant there for a few years, and then I've done collaborations with different agencies. So coming from a big city of 22 million people, I really see the public service as a place where we can have impact in people's everyday life. And it's a way of taking care of our neighbors, of our communities, of our cities. And when I started as a public servant in Mexico, there were many issues to deal with, like transportation problems or security problems, right? Water scarcity, amongst many others. And these are problems that are still there. We have not yet found a solution for them. But what really motivates me and motivated me at the time was really thinking about the sort of place-based solutions that we could come up, creative ones that would also connect with the communities that we serve. So that made me really interested in the diversity of lived experiences within the same city. And perhaps some of you have visited. It's a very big city. It looks like the image, that's the center of the city. But it also looks like the image that I'm showing you right now. That is the southern part of the city, and it's not an urban area, it's a rural one. And so the experiences of people living in that part of the city are very different from the ones living in the center of the city, right? So designing public services that just serve these very different communities becomes very difficult, it's a big challenge, right? So it creates a certain importance on taking into consideration the voices of the communities that just live within these environments, right? And are central to the development of public services. So with that context as a backdrop, I would like for us to discuss a little bit what is equitable engagement. And I would love to read perhaps some of your definitions. If you could take 30 seconds to think about what does equitable engagement mean to you, and write a short one-sentence definition on the chat, I would really appreciate it. Let's just take a minute to do that. What is equitable engagement for you?
I'll start reading some out. Fairness, all communities being represented using formats that reach all residents, where a diverse population is represented, all people have options to participate, ensuring people of all backgrounds have full access to participation, and their voices are all considered in a meaningful way. Everyone feels welcome, fully able to express themselves, and that their voice will make a difference. Making sure your engagement has the potential. Sometimes it goes upwards when people chat. To reach all people in your community in a way that they can understand. All impacted communities have an ability to be heard, bringing all communities together, participation of all people, inclusive engagement, not administering programs without understanding user experience, including being scared away at the front door. Yeah. Research suggests that in the US, people of lower SES are less likely to engage in civic life. Equitable engagements make sure the subset of our population has as much power and likelihood of engagement as their counterparts. Diversity and inclusion, engagement leading to economic well-being for all, meeting the community in its own space, and providing opportunities for all community members to participate. These are really great.
Yes, these are great. Thank you so much. I completely agree with all of you. So definitely, when we talk about equitable engagement, we're talking about fair collaboration and fair participation for everyone in our communities, right? And these may mean different sorts of collaboration. So let's take, for example, a researcher, a policymaker, or a designer, right? So someone that is trying to define or understand the problem or social situation to take action, to design something that responds to the need and requiring its mitigation, right? So looking for a solution. So depending on a disciplinary background, on personal experience, or even political views, this approach might be different, right? And the approach to a problem might require a certain stance. So sometimes expertise or personal assumptions may blind us from understanding the problem or situation from another perspective, from the perspective of the people that are actually impacted by the problem and in most the need of that service or that program or that aid, whatever it is that we are designing. So in order to have a more complete idea or view of what the problem is, to garner solutions or understand the impact of a public service, the ideal is to get the point of view or opinion of the communities and people experiencing the issue firsthand, right? As well as other relevant stakeholders that will complement our understanding of the issue and also the possibilities for solutions. So basically, we want to research a problem or a situation. And from there, we want to complement, right, our research or perception of that situation with other stakeholders' perspectives. And then with the people experiencing or living in that situation, so that we get the most, the kind of most encompassing understanding of the problem space. So just to get a sense of the people in the room today, I was wondering if you could, again, put on the chat if you consider engagement important, and if you do, why, and if it's not something taken into consideration at the moment in the work that you do, or in your projects, why not?
Yes, it helps solve problems in creative ways. Essential. There's no effective and equitable way to move our programs forward without it. We use stakeholder engagement in creating rules, regulations all the time. Yes, for many reasons, one being that it increases the success and sustainability of programs. Absolutely, it will maximize success to those most affected by the issue. It should, because it is a fundamental human right for people to voice their opinions. Essential for understanding knowledge these local experts have to bring to the table. Yes, important. So limited government resources can be spent actually addressing the problems communities care about. Absolutely, firsthand feedback is important to consider the lives of who we are designing for. Involves the people with most at stake. Yes, to make sure that all are included. Engaging visitors to state parks is done to enhance respect and stewardship to state parks. I do think it's important, but sometimes I worry that we are only hearing from a small, but sometimes I worry we are only hearing from a small subset of voices and they are having a, yeah, thank you, Sophia, if you could, it's jumping to the bottom, so I'm losing some of the comments.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for your comments. I'm going through them as well. That last one that you were reading, Hannah, could we just put a pin on that one for the end, for the questions, the Q&A, because I think it's a really important one, right? Like how do we select, or how do we design some of these processes so that we get to the people that need it, right? And not only kind of talk to people that are already raising their hands to participate. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for all of your comments. It creates clear goals, absolutely. Goals and expectations, right? Yes, definitely. Essential for adequately protecting the environment and lively of all, especially G communities, absolutely. Great, the livelihoods. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your comments. And so, for me, it is very important. I agree with you. It is essential to the work that we do in the public sector. And before I go deeper into why I think it is crucial for the work that we do, I would like to talk about an example. So while working for the Mexican National Digital Strategy, I was asked to carry out a testing exercise in collaboration with the Ministry of Labor for a job offering and seeking platform, very similar to the one that everyone uses that links people, that one. So the ministry had developed their own platform. And so we decided to do just a regular kind of usability test with computers and a set of questions and a survey. So we went into the Ministry of Labor's office, and it's a place where a lot of people are also doing in-person procedures. Some of them take a while. And so while people waited, we asked them to step into this room with computers, our instructions, and we would ask them things like, using this platform, can you find a job offering in the service industry and apply for it? And then we would track and see what their journey would be navigating the platform. Or we would ask them to post a job offering regarding a certain position and look how they were navigating, again, the platform. After that, we asked them a set of open questions just to understand their experience with it and things that they would like to see changed, things that were not clear, some things that were perhaps challenges. And so after we did this exercise, we realized from people's feedback that the platform needed very minor design changes. It was pretty straightforward and easy to use, but that was just kind of the superficial feedback. What it was really missing was an important component, and it was jobs in the agricultural sector. So we had a few young men that were there doing a certain procedure that day that participated in our exercise, and they gave us really good feedback. They told us, well, all of the jobs that you see in this platform are jobs that you would find in a city. But we're working in the agricultural sector, right? So I would really love to see something that has to do with the harvest of avocados during the avocado season, right? Or the harvest of blackberry. Mexico is a big blackberry producer. So that really gave us a view, right? A point of view that was not considered when designing the platform. There was an assumption, a bias that this community working in the agricultural sector would not be as connected as young men in the cities, right? But that was not true. They were telling us, we have phones, we are connected, we have internet. I would love to use this platform to just be able to connect with seasonal jobs or to get seasonal jobs. So in our recommendations, that was the main addition to the platform, right? Doing more research on how a whole agricultural section could be implemented, and then connect with producers on how they could do the postings for the job openings. And that helped us to really bring to the spotlight something that was neglected when developing the platform in the first place. And so the reason why equitable engagement is important, and I think it is really important, is because in today's world, we are running into very complex social problems. They are intertwined with ecological ones, with political ones, with economic problems. And the big issue is that these problems are very complex because different stakeholder groups have different views on them and define them very differently. So the solutions that they come up with are very sparse. They're very, very different, right? And there is a need to understand those different perspectives in order to coordinate, to connect, and to respond to the needs of the communities that have been systematically not taken into account in these processes. So it's especially important to do that in the public sector, because public institutions are meant to be the guardians, right, of our common assets, of our shared resources. They are meant to protect local residents' well-being. So these complex problems, they not only are interconnected, but they also sprawl and kind of cast a shadow into everyday life. So these problems are a sort of umbrella. They are large, they are complex, but the way that they manifest is in local ways, shaping the everyday lives of communities. And that's why understanding their experience, their point of views is so important. I think this cartoon or drawing sums it up well, right? It is not one thing, but the combination of multiple problems that shape the lived experience of communities that are in most need. So these are just a few examples of problems that are incredibly complex and manifest in different ways, depending on the place in the country, right? The area. So the opioid overdose epidemic, for example, why is it that it manifests differently in different areas of the country? Why is it so intense in West Virginia, for example, right? There is a need to understand the locality, even though this is a broader issue. There are ecological problems, right, that have become extremely complex and intertwined with many others. Climate change, it's there, it's real, but it manifests in very, very different ways depending on the place. And it may exacerbate already existing patterns. We have seen it, right, with the wildfires in California, in other places of the US, right, in Colorado, but also in other places of the world. We've seen it in Brazil, we've seen it in Australia. Or the contemporary consequences of public service provision, the existence of food deserts and other urban problems related to redlining in the early 20th century. And so in that sense, I would love to, again, read you, does your team practice engagement or participation processes? If so, how? If not, what do you wish that could be implemented? And again, if you would like to add it on the chat, or if you feel comfortable unmuting yourselves, please feel free to do that. I see Katie saying not yet, but we are about to embark in public engagement for program development. That's fantastic. We try, we don't, but I would like to do surveys, absolutely. Feedback through stakeholder roundtables, yes. We don't have the internal capacity, absolutely. That's a big issue as well. Hannah, could we pin that comment as well for the end?
Definitely.
Thank you. Sivila, I love their work. They're fantastic. Yes, diverse voices and lived experiences help to frame solutions. Absolutely. We do an annual immigrant integration conference. Fantastic. This is generally dictated by management, but we often suggest it and it's often agreed to. That's great. My job does not practice engagement. Some have been doing things for a long time. Don't want to change. Yes, change is difficult, and kind of pushing for different sort of methodologies or approaches to how things are done is also a challenge. It's a big challenge. You practice user research, excellent. Weekly meetings when we do icebreakers before starting the meeting, and then we discuss as a team what needs to be done. It's helpful in providing an opportunity to resolve issues too. Absolutely. One challenge is understanding the landscape of the community and all the different stakeholders we should be reaching. Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your comments. So I want to shift gears a little here and talk from a bit more of a design perspective, because a lot of the times equitable engagement is also referred to as co-design or participatory processes, participatory design. I don't know if you've heard of these terms. Have you heard of them? Yes, no, could you give me a thumbs up? I'll stop sharing for a minute and that way I can see you. If you can give me a thumbs up if you've heard of co-design. Let me see a couple.
We can also, you can also use 1 for yes or 2 for no in the chat. Or you could just write yes or no. That's also more simple.
Yes, you're a designer. Yes, okay. It's a little mixed. Okay, great. So I'll just go over them briefly so we're all on the same page. So these terms are very similar to our equitable engagement definition. They mean collaboration and participation with people beyond our kind of core working group, right? But there's a very subtle difference in practice that has a big impact in implementation. So I thought it was worth talking about that. So when we talk about co-design, we will understand the designer or researcher or public servant as one of the stakeholder groups in defining the problem or developing a solution. The community is at the front line of the issue, and that will be another core stakeholder. And of course, the community can be disaggregated in many other groups, but just kind of for the sake of this definition. And then there'll be other key stakeholders or key actors. And these could be other public servants, other public agencies, academics, universities, right? Activists, NGOs, whatnot. And the idea in co-design is that everyone is at the same level. It's a non-hierarchical collaboration, right? That is the key. And therefore, everyone has the same input in the definition of a problem, in the devising of a solution, or in the evaluation of a result. And this requires a lot of trust, a lot of cooperation, and therefore co-designing may be more time consuming, right? Require more coordination and negotiation in a process, and therefore a longer span of time. Actually, the co in co-design is from collaborative design, right? So that is kind of the core in co-design. In participatory processes, the designer, the researcher, or the public servant is in charge of making sense of the data gathered. And so the community and stakeholders are actually not at the same level. It's not an equal participation in the process, right? The designer kind of, or the public servant kind of works as a funnel of information. And that funnel helps in decision-making, right? Kind of distilling insights and opinions or feelings or information about the community and other actors. And this is different. And this difference is really important as it determines how much participation there is and if there is a reinterpretation of what is needed in the process, right? Because we're acting as this funnel, we need to be very aware of how we are creating or distilling these insights. So this process might be faster, but there is more responsibility in it, right? Because we are kind of reinterpreting the needs of the communities we serve, kind of channeling that information for the final outcome or design. And so just to make this a little bit more tangible, I want to talk about a case study. This is Mi Taxi in Mexico City. And it's a project that I developed through my doctorate, so through my PhD work. This first example is more qualitative. And then the second example that I will talk about, the New Jersey one, will gear towards the use of technology in order to leverage participation. So you'll see this is kind of more field work, and the following one is kind of more tech-based. But I really wanted to show you kind of two approaches to engagement, to equitable engagement. So in 2019, I collaborated with the Digital Public Innovation Agency in Mexico City for the development of the city's taxi app. And it was a project that involved doing research, sort of about the state of affairs of public taxis in the city, doing service design and how we could provide a new service through the app, and then the platform design, so the UX, the user experience, and the UI, the user interface of the app. And we could have approached the project from solely a design perspective, right? At the end of the day, we were developing a digital platform. Nevertheless, we took it very seriously and we gave a lot of weight and importance to including the lived experiences of those involved in the use of public taxis in the city. So for a bit of context, Mexico City has 140,000 taxis, it's estimated. And I say it's estimated because from that number, 25 to 30,000 approximately are considered pirate taxis. So taxis that may look like a public taxi, but they're not registered, or they're not registered in the Ministry of Transportation, right? The other issue is that for many years, there hadn't been a lot of investment in the creation of a database. So it was incomplete. Not all of the cars were in the database, not all of the drivers. And just to make it a little bit more difficult, each taxi had from 1 to 5 drivers in order to keep the taxi going, right? To keep the taxi working 24/7 and maximize profits. So imagine the amount of people working in this industry, right? At the same time, in parallel, Mexico City was living very high levels of insecurity and violence, especially towards women. And in the lapse of 2 weeks, there had been 3 femicides, unfortunately, that started as kidnappings within public taxis, right? So it became a really pressing issue, and not only a pressing issue from our perspective as government officials, but also for the women living in the periphery of the city and who use public taxis on a daily basis as one of their legs for their transportation rights, right? Going towards the center of the city for work. So we determined there was a need for different levels of engagement to understand the problem. And therefore, there were multiple groups that we needed to talk to. The first group were other public servants and experts from the ministries and agencies that were collaborating with us in security, in transportation, even governments from neighboring states, right? Because the city is so big that it sprawls into neighboring states. Then we asked ourselves, well, who are the most impacted groups by unsafe taxi rides? And we thought about civil society and taxi drivers, right? People there living the moment and in kind of at the forefront of the issue. And because of the context at the time, we decided to talk and do some group work with citizens, like mixed groups, but really focus on women and really focus on women living in areas of the city that had really high levels of peril against women and were considered as marginalized. And for taxi drivers, we segmented them into senior and junior drivers. And what I mean by that is that for senior drivers, we worked with people that had been driving a taxi for 20 or 30 years, right? And for whom the idea of using an app just while they were driving was not something that they wanted to do or get involved in, right? And then another group, what we call the kind of junior drivers. These were from younger generations, and for part-time, they would drive public taxis, but then for another part of their time, they would drive taxis or cars that were linked to private apps, right? Like the ones that we know in many cities around the world. So they felt very comfortable with the idea of adopting an app and really championed it when we went and presented it to them. They were like, oh yes, these would be fantastic. It would make my work much easier if I could actually just have an app and also have rides through the app, not only pick up people on the street. And so we did this set of workshops and group conversations with them and got very interesting insights. We distilled them and touched base with the Ministry of Transportation just to corroborate that what we were understanding was in line with the work that they've been doing for many years. And so, for example, we learned that most women use a third-party app like WhatsApp to share their location with family members and friends when they were riding on the taxi. And on the other hand, taxi drivers also let us know that they lived with a lot of fear as well. They were also living very violent experiences when driving their taxis. And they also used WhatsApp to communicate to other drivers when something came up. So basically, we understood that our app needed to have a third app connection, right, to WhatsApp, because these were communities that were using it on a daily basis. We also learned that there was little trust in having an emergency button, for example, because participants considered that if something happened and they pressed it, they were not sure that a response would be elicited, right? There was very little trust in the response. So that was a big red flag to us. It made it kind of our mission to make sure that that button actually connected to a robust protocol in the backend, right? So we created a set of very low resolution prototypes. I wish I could show you the prototypes that we created, but it's kind of tricky to show that documentation. But they were basically printed on paper, and it was a really nice way to have them tell us the sort of functions that they wanted the app to have, the sort of information that would be required or needed. And once those functions were determined, we went back to our internal group of public servants and started to see what sort of functions connected to already existing services or protocols, and what were the new ones that needed to be developed from scratch, basically. And some of those protocols entailed coordinating quite a diversity of public offices, the main one being that emergency button. So finally, we did the work and we tested the app on the ground. And that was a really big step for us, really, really important, because we wanted to make sure that that emergency button would actually trigger that newly designed protocol. So this is the map of the city. This is the map of Mexico City. And we wanted to serve communities that did not have access to private transportation apps, and that lived in those non-affluent areas in the periphery of the city that usually had low connectivity and, as I mentioned, high level of peril against women. So we were trying to avoid that green part that you see on the map, which is where the private apps work and the most affluent area of the city. We were really, really trying to kind of set the harshest conditions for the testing of the app. And so with these parameters, we selected the areas, the gray dots, to do the tests. And we collaborated with taxi drivers that would just drive us around back and forth. And we would just press the button and then take the time. Take the time for a police car, right? Sometimes even in foot, just people to stop the car and kind of see what was happening. At the beginning, when we did our tests, it would take 13 minutes just to stop the car. Towards the end of our tests, it would take 3 minutes, which was actually pretty good considering that it connected to our main security office in the city, followed the cab with cameras, and then we're able to send someone, deploy cars to stop it. So these are just early prototypes we used to test the app. And as you can see, they still have some glitches, but they really allowed us to go back to the developers and iterate, right? Take into consideration the experiences doing these tests with the taxi drivers. And it also helped us to create this app as a mirror, not only for citizens, but also for drivers, right? That had expressed also the need of having something that connected them to the authorities because they were living these very violent incidents as well. So this is the final app and how it is now being used in the city. I believe they are now in their 3rd iteration. And if you go to Mexico City, you can download it and use it in order to hail a public cab. Now, this second example, let me just take a quick look at the chat. I see some comments. This must be why some people told me to use Uber when I was in Mexico. Yes, exactly. That is one of the reasons. Yes, to lo-fi paper prototypes. Yes, really low, kind of low resolution, quote unquote, prototypes, paper-based, are very easy to test things out. We don't need to have a fully developed app or a platform in order to do that. So yes, this second example is of a participatory process developed by the Future of Work Task Force in the state of New Jersey. And I know there's a few people joining us today from New Jersey. So they were responsible for undertaking the impact of technological developments in the labor landscape and employment landscape. So in 2020, the task force asked New Jersey residents what they felt were the challenges that technology created to the future of work. And from that input, the task force would create a set of recommendations for the state. And actually, let me just put this link on the chat. I think it may be interesting. It's a direct link to a report on the work that they did. So by using a tool that is called All Our Ideas, it allowed for people to submit ideas and then rank them in a very easy voting-like manner. And nearly 4,000 people responded and participated to the call. That large number of participants was a result of collaboration with over 40 community stakeholders and workforce organizations that shared the call and really encouraged people to participate. I will also put the link to the platform that they used on the chat. It's open source and free, so it may be of use for some of you. And this is how the platform looks. So through the platform, 166 different problem statements were drafted. And then the platform would actually just give you two randomized options, and then you could vote on one of those. Those were later used as input for the recommendations, right? Depending on the ranking from the options that you got. And because New Jersey has a very large Spanish-speaking community, most of the prompts and the communication materials were all also translated and kind of put out there in Spanish as well. So considering lived experience as an expertise is a deep, deep change in the way that we define problems and think of solutions, right? To the way that we think about our position in relation to the communities we serve. Doing participatory processes is definitely a start, but the aim would be to really have out there co-design processes, right? Where communities also have a seat at the table. Key stakeholders can negotiate and say what they need, what they want, and we can kind of do this democratic process for the development and implementation of our public programs and services. And this is a quote I really like from Emma Blomkamp. She is an Australian researcher on the topic. And basically, I will read it out loud. She says, although they may be creative experts in their own lives, many people are likely to need support or facilitation to express themselves in meaningfully participating co-design. An important part of the co-design process is having a skilled facilitator who can choose the most appropriate tools to enable people to communicate and engage with each other, as well as feel comfortable and inspired enough to envision their own and others' ideas. And I think what it becomes really kind of motivating is thinking about that sort of facilitation. That facilitation is not the same one for everyone or in all of our work environments, right? In some places, that sort of facilitation can come through group conversations or through workshops or through the use of digital platforms that help us gather just a lot of opinions in a short amount of time. It can also come through low resolution prototypes. It can come from surveying people or doing interviews. So that facilitation can come in very different ways. And so before I go into kind of the final considerations to conduct an engagement, I just wanted to take a pause and see if there are any questions or any comments. Let me open up the chat. Yes, thank you, Hannah. I am happy to share the slides and with the recording and send any other resources that I've mentioned. All right, I will continue then. So I think this is a really fantastic resource. It's a report that was put together by Nesta and the GovLab. So Collective Intelligence, a checklist for the public sector. And it's a guide where they put together a checklist just to consider how to do an engagement and think about the questions before jumping into doing this sort of work. I'll put the link on the chat because this is also free and open so that you can have it. And not only they did a checklist, but they created a flow chart that helps you determine if doing community engagement is the right thing for you. Right? Sometimes we're tackling a problem that maybe needs more quantitative data, or where an engagement process would not be fruitful because, I don't know, maybe the relationship with a certain community is not the best. It's not the moment to do it, right? So it helps you determine those kind of steps to see if that is the best pathway for you and the work that you're doing. So the first question or consideration to take into account is if you have articulated the project's goals. This is important because without goals, we may mislead the communities we work with, right? I have a specific goal, which is to develop a taxi app. That is what we're working for. And so when people would come and sit down with us, we would really take them towards that journey. It wasn't about developing another program or another service. It was about the app. So understanding what the goal is vital. It's crucial when starting the work. The second one has to do with identifying the right participants, right? Sometimes those right participants will arise from further research or other information that you may acquire. Sometimes identifying right participants comes from a certain motivation. For us, it was imperative to create a safety protocol that would protect, or at least would be reliable for women in those taxis. So we made that choice from the beginning. So just having that clear from the get-go is important so that you can select the sort of community that you want to work with and that you want to work for. Then can you reach the participants you've identified, right? Sometimes we don't have the capacity or the resources or the medium to reach that community or to work in the perhaps medium term with them. We need to be realistic on how much we can do with those participants because we don't want to let them down, right? We don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to erode that trust even further sometimes. Then who is the right owner? And what they mean by this is that the project must have an accountable owner, right? Someone that may be inside or outside of government. It may be a coalition of partners, but who is going to be responsible for what happens with that project? In this case, it was the Agency for Digital Innovation in Mexico City, right? They knew who to go with and who to talk to, who was in charge of that project. Have you included incentives for participation? That is I think it depends on the place. I am not sure if that is something that can happen in the US. In Mexico, it depends. You cannot give participants, when you're working with them as a public entity, there cannot be monetary incentives, but there may be other sort of incentives, right? A lot of the people that we talked to actually just came and did it because they really wanted to help. People were eager to have their voices heard, to participate, to say, I have an input in this process. I want this to be a safer place, right? Perhaps in the US, incentives can be thought of in other ways. Have you defined the tasks, right? It is important to define those tasks. We were working with such a large group in the taxi app example that it was important to know who was developing and kind of doing the back end of the app, who was doing the front end, who was doing the work on site or kind of with the communities. That was me and my group, right? Who was also coming back and bringing all this information to the mayor of the city so that they could approve certain protocols. It required a lot of coordination and collaboration amongst us as public servants, and having defined tasks was extremely useful and helpful. Establish a workflow, right? Once we did the testings, who did we report those times to? Once those times were reported, what were the sort of kind of triggers that it created in our workflows in order to change some of the protocols or to change some of the final designs in the app? How will you evaluate inputs? So after we did all of those conversations, group conversations with stakeholders, with drivers, with women, we would actually sit down and do something that is called affinity diagramming, which is basically looking at transcripts of the conversations that we had and looking at what were the meaningful parts and then putting them and clustering in ways that created kind of higher level concepts And that gave us a clue or a path of the sort of decisions or things that we wanted to look at. And just as a comment, another way to evaluate inputs, it can be done in kind of automatized or digital form. There are a few platforms that do this, and I'm happy to talk about that later in the Q&A. And then how will you use those insights, right? Those gained insights, because you, as I mentioned, do not want to erode any trust that the community has put on the process, on you. Like, if you are kind of leading that effort of engaging with them, you see them, you're there. It's a kind of human to human interaction. So there is a responsibility to not waste their time and to really take seriously the sort of feedback that you get. So as I mentioned, for us, when we got that feedback on, we do not trust that this app will actually respond, it made it our mission to make sure that the protocol actually worked, that their feedback was actually implemented, right? So this is just the list. It's as well on the document. The document has a further explanation for each one of these points. And then I just wanted to talk or discuss with you some of the challenges, right, to consider. So in developing an engagement, I would love to hear what are some of the challenges that you've encountered or think you may face or might face when doing this sort of work. And I will open up the chat. Childcare as an incentive, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, we did some processes, participatory processes with, I will stop sharing so that I can see you. We did some participatory processes with, on a project looking at children that worked and lived in markets in Mexico City. And a big part of those processes required us to bring people and take into consideration just developing activities for the kids while we were talking to the parents, or taking care of their little brothers and sisters, right? Their siblings while we were talking to them. So absolutely, childcare may be a big incentive. Oops, I lost the chat. I see more comments. Transportation, stipends, gift cards, absolutely. In-person interpretation, absolutely. So some of the challenges: management and acceptance, capacity of the community, trust from the community with government, absolutely. That is a very big challenge, a very big barrier. Transportation access, yes, absolutely. When we were doing the groups with women, most of them were coming from places that were quite far away. So looking for a place that was kind of easy access for them, and also where they felt comfortable. Because coming into a government building and sitting down and giving your opinion or talking about things may not be the most and kind of make them feel most at ease, right? So finding those spaces where you meet the community where they're at, that's a great point. Getting input from the residents instead of the advocate groups, right? Or understanding that the advocates are accurately representing the community needs, absolutely. Absolutely, that happened to us a lot with the drivers. They had a lot of kind of advocacy or representative groups. People may not understand what is possible from a government perspective. Sometimes engagement comes across as disappointing if we can't always meet what community wants. Absolutely, absolutely. So keeping the expectations within certain parameters. Totally. Getting people to participate, communicating complex scientific concepts to the general public so that they can provide meaningful input. Yes, translating perhaps very technical or academic terms into things that are accessible is also important. Meeting the community in their environment, yes. Engagement does not feel genuine from government. It's all about building relationships, trust, transparency. Yes, absolutely. And that requires time. So that's why these processes may seem long. They are hard sometimes to sell, right? Or to pitch, because we're talking about human relationships here. It's not just a kind of linear technical process and that's it. Absolutely. Reaching people with language and cultural barriers. Yes. Yes, and the homeless. Absolutely. Thank you so much for all of your comments. Hannah, I believe that the chat will also be saved with the recording, right? So that people can actually see what others added.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Excellent. So I will share my slides again, just for a few final minutes. I am almost done, I promise. So just to finish, I thought that I would wrap up with this report. It's fantastic. It's really, really good. It's from the Urban Institute, and it basically gives a set of examples, case studies. It's a toolkit on how to do this sort of work from an equitable perspective, right? And it's what I think is most important is that, as I was mentioning, it's important to connect these concepts to what is happening locally and how some of these problems manifest locally. And so this gives a really nice perspective from kind of a United States perspective, right? So I will put that link on the chat so that you have that as well. And with that being said, I just wanted to hand it, before questions, I want to hand it over to Hannah, because it would be fantastic if you replied to a survey, correct?